Okay, hi everyone. This is Sandy Simmons from Australia, bringing you the Silver Tent TV tonight. And we're going to be talking about what happens if your medicine isn't available. What do you do? So I wanted to start off with just a few little statistics. So you'll have to just bear with me while I read these. I got them off the internet today, and I'm not saying they're perfect, but it's going to give us a starting point and a bit of an idea about what actually happens with our medicines and the availability. So there are some medicines that, you know, there's hundreds, thousands of medicines out there that are approved. Okay, so there's probably somewhere around, I think I saw something between 20 and 30,000 because it varies from country to country. But currently, as of today, these are world figures that have come up. There's 406 medicines that are unavailable as of today, and it changes, obviously. 47 of them are critical medicines that are required, and 225 have also been discontinued, and this is a normal thing because they're discontinued and new ones replacing them. So we don't need to get too concerned, but you can start to see that, you know, the shortages that come are happening all the time, okay? We don't know that. We have no idea what goes on in the background. The other things I wanted to talk about, the three most prescribed drugs in the whole world. Has anybody got any idea what they would be? Possibly not, because I didn't. And the most widely prescribed drug is Lipitor. Okay, and we all, I think, know that Lipitor is for reducing cholesterol. I'm going to give figures for the three main countries that we're talking about here. So the UK had 49.9 million prescriptions in the year 2020 to 21. This is for all countries that we're talking about in that time frame. The US had 24.5 million, and Australia had 11.5 million. So you can see it's a huge drug, you know. So we'll be talking about, do we really need to have this one? What can we do to, you know, relieve ourselves without having to take medication? The next one is pantoprazole. There's a couple of other different names that you can use, but this is for GORD, for your gastric, you know, your things that are going on, regurgitating your food and all sorts of pain that can happen with that. That's one of the others is 9.299295 prescriptions were written for that. Okay, and that's in Australia. I'm sorry, I didn't look up what it was for the UK. And then the next biggest one is metformin. So metformin is to regulate your blood sugar. And so that is also one that we can also probably avoid by just doing self-care and self-responsible health things that we can do at home. So I just wanted to introduce a few figures to get us thinking. I'm Sandy B Simmons. That's because Sandy Simmons is a stripper in the US, and so I put the B in there, my middle name. So I wasn't confused with her. I'm a naturopath, nutritionist. I've worked in the field for over 30 years. I've got a whole lot of other things that I do as well, but just to say those today because that's covering the topics that we're talking about. So that's me. I'm going to hand it over to Dee if she would like to introduce herself so that you know who is on our panel tonight.
Hello, thank you, Sandy. Thanks very much for that introduction. It's quite eye-opening, isn't it, of those drugs. So I'm Dee. I live in the UK, and I'm a qualified psychotherapist. I'm a home hypnotherapist and a natural wellness advocate. I have had IBS since I was 8 years old, so I know a lot about the gastric drug, put it that way. And And I've used natural means most of my life to keep well and to keep healthy. And that is what I do now. I help people to keep well and healthy without pharmacological drugs. So that's what I do, and I've been doing that for a long time. And my specialism in my work is chronic pain, IBS, and gut-specific issues. So that's what I do.
Unmute myself. Thank you, Dee. Christina, tell us about you.
I'm Christina. I live in Devon in the UK, and my history is very much a qualified aromatherapist, strong interest in herbal medicine. In my 40s, I had a situation where I had a minor stroke through pressure of work. So I take a great interest in things related to the brain and anything to do with TIAs, that transient ischemic attacks and stroke. I also started some training to help people be aware of what they can do to test if someone suddenly has an attack on the street or in a public place, to see, are these people having a stroke? There are other things that are related to stroke where if you're tapping on someone's face, the nerves in the face can help bring the people back quite quickly if they've gone into a sort of, it helps connect the nerves. The other thing that happened to me was about 9 years ago, I had open heart surgery to have a valve replaced in my heart. This is another one of my interests, medicine around the heart, or alternative medicine around the heart, and working along with the cardiologist to see what we can do. I was very fortunate during my operation that one of my surgeons was an Asian doctor who had trained in medicine from his country. And I also had a series of hypnotherapy before I even went into the surgery to ensure that my surgery would go smoothly and I wouldn't get stressed during it. So I think those things helped me. Right now, I am retired and I don't practice, but behind the scenes, I'm very interested in working with flower essences and vibrational essences. And I've trained in orchid essences, and with one of the Australian essence makers, Ian White, who I'm sure Sandy knows. I'm very interested in those particular essences. So that's what I do. And I'm always available for people in the community who find me for help.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Christina. Great to hear about what you do. So over to Katie.
Hi there, everyone. Yes, I'm Katie. Also can find me as Katie J. Robinson on Facebook. And for me, actually, I suppose it's probably been about 35 years that I've been trying to always do things naturally wherever possible. And it started, my mother got into things when I was a teenager, and, you know, I didn't pay that much attention apart from when she threw all the sugar out in the house, and we had to sort of manage without. But for myself, I started investigating, and I ended up doing training in massage and nutrition and Reiki. And I've really found that everything over the years is fascinating to me. I've done first aid, homeopathy, sort of self-trained in a lot of herbal medicines. And I have a friend who's a medical herbalist, so I can check in with her. And really, I just find that there's so much there. I have bookshelves and bookshelves of naturopathic stuff, and I just constantly diving into it, especially the homeopathy and the herbal stuff, because I find there's so much in there. And when I think about it, I mean, my sons are in their mid-20s now, and I think, gosh, you know, yeah, I don't know that they've been to the doctor much. My eldest son is 27 and has had one lot of antibiotics. And I think, well, actually, we do manage, you know, with a lot of things. So I have a lot of sort of first aid, if you like, and emergency stuff that I would use, both herbal. I mix and match, really. I'm not, you know, I don't stick to one particular system. If I find something that works, like I find essential oils amazing for some of those conditions you were talking about at the beginning, Sandy. And so I just really mix and match as the intuition and the research takes me. Currently now I tend to, I spend quite a lot of time out in woodlands because I'm a forest bathing guide, and I really love that, taking people out, helping immerse themselves in nature. And it's such an amazing way to regulate our nervous system without having to worry about whether you're meditating properly, because I had quite a bit of resistance to that initially. And it just happens when you're gradually, you just get involved and immersed in nature. And that's, you know, one reason is finding ways to regulate our nervous system. It helps our body function the way it's intended to. So that's been a real eye-opener for me. And I do bits of one-to-one health mentoring as and when the need arises. So yeah, I just love what's out there. We have everything is there. So you know, if somebody asks about advising the doctor, I sort of say, well, I haven't really much experience with doctors because I don't.
Okay, that's great, Katie. Thanks for that. So I guess I should expand a bit on what I do then. I've probably, over the 35 years of delved into a lot of energy systems, and now have my own energy system called In Spirit. So I work with people with that. But I have a big bag of tricks, like Katie was saying, and you just take what's needed for each person as they come along. So it could be anything. So I've also worked with a Russian scientist for the last 25 years, and I've learned a lot of old therapies. So I use a lot of old water therapies as well, a lot of vibrational medicine, vibrational cooking, all sorts of things. So it's whatever comes out for the person when they're sitting in front of me. So without any further ado, let's get into our topic. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. So let's have a think about this. So if your medicine is not available for someone you love, someone you live with, or, you know, a parent or something like that, what are we going to do? You know, what other things can we do? I'm just going to start the ball rolling by saying I had a couple of people during the time we spent at home the last few years where some medicines weren't available for a short time. And one of those was insulin. Now, one of my friends has a son who is born with diabetes, so insulin dependent. But we got around it. The chemist she was getting her prescriptions from had completely got cleared out. And I think a lot of that wasn't necessarily always that there was a shortage of medicines all around anyway, but people were panic buying and storing things up. But it doesn't matter, you know, how that's happened, but what would you do? So we talked a lot about, you know, she said, this has never happened before. And she started to panic a little bit. So, you know, the main things are to keep hydrated, keep moving, just get the body moving. So exercise, walking, doing whatever, and trying to keep as much, eating small portions often, and being very careful of carbohydrates so that we didn't overload on that. Managing stress, the little boy was 8, so very hard to, once he realised, it was a bit hard to keep him calm. But anyway, we got over it and we were able to get some insulin in a couple of days, but it was a bit scary. So that's just to give you a scenario about what can happen. There's plenty of other anecdotes for the things that we were talking about before. So I just wanted to bring that one up because it's the statistics for diabetes is going through the roof. Okay, so diabetes is, I've got it here somewhere. Diabetes is like at least 10% of most people's populations in the US, Australia, and and where haven't I said the UK, where you all are. 10% are type 1, okay? 10% out of all the cases. So that's 90% of cases are completely avoidable, or well, pretty much. So there's really something that we have to think about there with diabetes, and you know, even the doctors do warn you when you go to the doctors, and they tell you you've got to lose weight, you've got to change your diet, you've got to do all those things, but does anybody do it? So people need to start listening. So that's one of the things that little story that I wanted to share, and I'm going to hand it over to Dee to see what she has to say.
Wow, yes. I mean, insulin is one of those drugs that people, once they've been diagnosed with diabetes and they've been told that insulin is the thing that will keep you well, they then rely heavily on it rather than, I mean, we all have to take some level of responsibility for our health, I believe. And it's really important that programming, as a hypnotherapist, I can see the medical programming happening to me if I ever do have to go and get tested for something so I can treat myself, because you can't treat yourself holistically unless you know what you're dealing with. So it's the only time I go into a doctor's surgery now, if I ever go in there, because I'm extremely healthy. But once you know what you're dealing with, there is so much out there. And I think in order for people to loosen the grip that the pharmaceutical industry has on us is to educate ourselves. We have to getting back to what we used to do, what people used to do years ago, before a lot of these pharmaceutical drugs were out there. People did rely on natural methods. They relied on plants and herbs and the right food, and you know, the diet was completely different as well. So you know, now we eat foods out of season and there's an abundance of them, and the way they're farmed and grown and you know, treated as in the soil and the soil. So there's so much change now from the past, and we really need an education, I think, on those, on why we have become so dependent on other people rather than taking personal responsibility for our own health. And it's all down to a lack of education and a complete dependency on the pharmaceutical industry, really. So I'm not diabetic. You know, I know that if somebody's diabetic, it is about exactly what you said, Sandy. It's all about small portions, cutting down the sugars and carbohydrates, and sticking to certain foods. And that's an education in itself. For me, it's more to do with how would I, if I needed something to help with my with a gut issue that I might have had, then what can I use instead of omeprazole, for instance, because that's another one that you take. They're all got different names, but I think they're all got the same ingredients, really. You take omeprazole to stop the acid. Well, actually, you know, there are so many other things that we can do other than take that drug, that, you know, and it's about an education. So that's what I would be saying to people. Let's look at what else is around. What did people use before then? And then see what we can do for ourselves. Yeah.
Exactly. Thanks, Dee. Okay, Christina. Just unmute yourself, Christina. Well, Christina's finding her button to unmute. We might cross over to Katie and we'll come back to you, Christina.
Hi there. Well, I think there are so many parts of us that are involved in things like that. So of course we can make different choices in what we eat. And I think, to be honest, there are various aspects to that. One, we're ingesting a load of chemicals which are disrupting our hormones. We're using stuff to make things that are constructed rather than just natural products, and in order to make them taste better or hold together, we're using all these products, and we're ingesting those, and those are not without consequence. You know, some of them are hormone disruptors. We're rubbing them on our skins and our toiletries, they're in the air, they're in our toothpaste. So there's a massive chemical overdose generally, apart from anything medication wise we might be taking. So, you know, trying to reduce our exposure to those sorts of things can be very important. Certainly, as you've both already said, the aspect of choosing, you know, perhaps having more good fats and reducing the carbohydrate balance will really help, because I know there's quite a movement that has said that, you know, just having whole food carbohydrates, actually it only makes it contributes to the situation. It's not actually eliminating it. So some people go quite dramatically one way and try something new, but you know what? Within a month, somebody I know nearby, it took 3 months doing basically a ketogenic diet, so removing most of the carbs apart from what was in some vegetables naturally, and they, within 3 months, all completely gone. But you need to really be determined and to want to do that. And some people find the whole thought of that very difficult. But for example, about my mid-40s, I became very conscious that I was eating quite a lot of sweet stuff. It's one of those, I think sweetness is one of those things that we use as a comfort food very much. So I had a bit of a thing with cheese, which is a nice combination of fat and salt, and chocolate and other sweet things, which of course are often fat and sugar. And fat, sugar and salt are the things which give food taste. So to be honest, the thought of removing those, it just doesn't make things tasty. And I think it disrupts the natural processes in our body, because we're looking for salt and sweet and fat. And if we make good choices and have natural forms of sugar and fat and salt, then it's not going to have the drastic effects that these added ones are having for us. So yeah, there are slight tweaks perhaps we can make, which would make it less difficult for us. And also I remember doing a month. I decided I was going to do 4 weeks and see what happened with my taste buds. And so I actually had pretty much raw stuff. I was juicing and salads, and I was all the pulp, because I'm not a fan of juicing all the time. I prefer smoothies, because you've got the fiber then and the other components of it. And so any pulp I was putting with olive oil and lemon juice in salad and things. And I tell you, at the end of 4 weeks, if you'd said to me, would you like this bag of celery, or would you like a 200-gram bar of your favorite chocolate, I'd have gone, give me the celery. I was staggered by how much it changed my taste buds. And it showed me really that you can do anything. People say, oh, I can't do that. But actually, yes, you can. If you will give yourself, say, a minimum of 2 weeks, you'll be amazed what will change in that time. And the other thing I'd say about that is I had a friend who was living in such a stressful situation. His wife and the family were very overwhelming and coercive, and he was a very gentle soul. And each time I met up with him, which wasn't that often, maybe a couple of times a year, he was more and more stressed. And gradually he started getting symptoms of diabetes, and his blood flow was not good. And eventually, very sadly, he didn't manage to manage his stress. And I kept saying to him, somehow you need to, because he was eating well. But the stress of the situation with the family was so great. And eventually, sadly, he did die from it. So despite other elements, stress is massive because it disrupts all our hormone balance. You know, high cortisol just disrupts everything. So that's a really key thing I would include as well.
Yeah. Wow, that's sad, isn't it, when that gets to that? But as how many people do I go to see and do home visits for the family if they're sort of come to me as a last resort, and the family are just making more stress, unfortunately. Christina, are you going to unmute and chat?
Lots of layers started to come on top of my Zoom picture, so that's what happened.
It's all right.
Blood sugar. I have had blood sugar issues since I was young. I had low blood sugar, hypoglycemia it's called.
Yeah.
And as I've got older, through my life, I've learned to how to deal with it. And I would agree this small meals regularly, knowing which foods to take. But during the period after lockdown, a friend of mine bought me a book. I like to bake and cook. And she bought me this book, The Complete, The Old-Fashioned Sweet Shop. And I launched into every week doing one of these recipes. And of course, they were all very high sugar. And I sent myself into a state of pre-diabetes from eating too much sugar. And so that was the complete opposite, really, of hypoglycemia. It's hyperglycemia, I think it is similar, in the pre-diabetic state. So I've been doing fine with my food since that time. And then 2 weeks ago, I collapsed on the way to town. I had a vision disturbance. I recognized it as something wrong with my blood sugar. Momentarily, I thought, am I having something else? Is this a TIA? Because I've had a stroke. And it was quite a similar situation, except that I wasn't having some of the other symptoms. And it took me a little while to recover, and no one came along, and I didn't have anything with me in my bag. So it did send me into a bit of a state. Now, I've since had blood test, and I've got an appointment with the doctor, but it's taken 2 weeks to be seen. And I just thought that was really rather long. Fortunately, I know what to do, but what if I'd been someone who didn't know what to do? And so, you know, I totally identify with all these things you're talking about watching our sugar. And I think the amount of sweets and things on offer to children these days, and I see them with their pocket money in buying fistfuls of it after school. We really do need to educate the children. And I'm not quite sure. I feel it should come at family level, but it doesn't always. And it depends what they've been, what their history is.
Exactly. It's a difficult one because we have to educate the parents to educate the children, but maybe we've got to educate the children to educate the parents.
Yes, yes.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I'm out of the school system now. I don't really know what they're taught over here. It's probably the same sort of curriculum as the UK. But there is so much that needs to be done. And as Katie said, we're ingesting a lot of food that isn't really very nutritious, you know. So we've got that level going on, as well as the pharmaceuticals going on, the stress levels. We have to say that they're so much higher now than they were when we were young. You know, we've got the internet staying on all night, going through the house. We've got all sorts of other things to deal with. So there really does need to be a lot more education. And I'm also fortunate, Katie, I have brought my kids up, and my daughter just finished a fast, and so did my son, because that's one of the things that I teach, therapeutic fasting, like in the some of the places in Europe. And but they've hardly had any medication in their life, but I've had other sources to give them, you know. So they've been fortunate, and hopefully that's rubbing off onto their partners and their children. But that's all we can do. That's the best we can do. So that's leading in to, you know, what is it that we can do? What is it that we're doing right now that it's affecting everybody around us? Does anybody ask you what you do? I mean, I'm going to just share that I'm almost 68, and people say to me, you can't be. And I said, well, I am, partly because I've got good genes, but but I've looked after myself for the last 35 years. I wasn't before. I had IBS, I had all sorts of things going on. But hey, you learn to work with yourself. Everybody needs to take some responsibility to find out what works for them, because there is no one right way. And we need to, you know, not so much experiment, but we need guidance as to the best things to try for us. So just going to pass that over to Dee to see what it is that, you know, you're doing or you could do to spread the word.
Well, I actually spread the word on my own social media accounts. So I'm currently working with hydrogen-rich water. It's a very, very high antioxidant. It's got more antioxidants in one glass than a kilo of blueberries. So who can eat a kilo of blueberries? Not many, but thousands of us can drink a glass of water. And if it's the right water, then that is really, really important. You know, the two main things that we've got in our lives that keep us alive is air and water. You know, we can't live without them, can we? And so for me, this is what I'm doing at the moment. I'm spreading the word about hydrogen-rich water, getting the right minerals, and making sure that the water's not being stagnant in plastic bottles for 3 years on the shelf before you buy it. And making sure that, you know, what's in your tap water, making sure that people fully understand what's going on with that. So what I'm doing currently is educating people on actually getting properly hydrated and eating as clean a diet as you possibly can. And that is what I'm doing on my Instagram account, my Facebook account, TikTok. I've even mastered TikTok. Can you believe it? You know, and I'm no spring chicken either. You know, I was 64 last week, and it's kind of like, oh, I'm using TikTok. I'm like down with the young ones now, you know. But all of this is just to get the message out to people, because over the last 3 years, as we all know, we've had a global situation that has created a lot of what Katie said, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. And people have had to manage, and people are going to have to manage even more, because I don't know if anybody's ever tried to get an appointment with a doctor or a hospital or an ambulance. My daughter's father-in-law fell outside his house, and he's had several dizzy spells. He fell outside his house, and it was 5 hours on the floor in the cold, waiting for an ambulance to come. 5 hours. Now, if that had been a heart problem or something more serious, he may not have made it. So it's about educating people to say, look, there's so much more you can do, and these are the kind of foundations of good health. And we can't always start using natural remedies to get rid of things that are chronic and serious, but we can start to make steps to ease those and then start to maintain that level of health and wellness. And it happens, like you said, very quickly. You know, I think it was you, Katie, that said within 2 weeks your taste buds would change, and you know, your whole diet was kind of transformed. That really is how quickly it can happen when you start to look at, well, what is an alternative? That we've got Google. we've got, you know, you can just say, hey Siri on your phone and ask for something and it pops up. artificial intelligence is actually quite good, and it's saying what was used back in the day when, you know, these drugs weren't around. What can I use? And that's teaching people how to actually use artificial intelligence in a very good way, and seeing what comes back. And ask your grandma and ask your granddad if they've got any books that they used to have. I've got so many books on, because I trust books more than tech, actually, because tech you can have things taken out of books online and other things put in. I'm a little bit suspicious of it sometimes, but with a book, it's all there, it's written down. So yeah, go into an old bookshop and go and find a book on health and wellness. I would say, you know, natural remedies, homeopathy, herbs, you know, and yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment, teaching people about clean, healthy, the right water and good nutrition.
Fabulous. That's excellent. And do your family, do they follow your footsteps?
I'll mute myself again. Yes, my youngest daughter does, and my granddaughter. They're very much into making sure that they cook from scratch and that kind of thing. My eldest daughter probably not so much. She does like a healthy diet, but you know, she doesn't live near me anymore, so I don't know what her lifestyle's like anymore, really. My other extended family, you know, like my brother and sister, I believe they do try to have a healthier diet, but they like things that I wouldn't eat. No, so there are things that I look at and I'm kind of like, oh, gobsmacked at that, you know. But we all grow up differently, don't we? You know, and it's like we say, it's hard to change a habit of a lifetime, as my mother used to say.
Yes, there's got to be willingness, hasn't there? Willingness.
Yes, there's got to be that willingness to do it. And sometimes I think people reach a level of health or illness, in fact, that actually is the trigger to kickstart them into a healthier way of being. So like everything, we have to reach our own rock bottom before we actually start doing that. That's how it works.
Yes, unfortunately, and probably we're in all of this maybe because some of us have done that, but that's another story. Okay, Christina.
Well, I'm not actually practicing or trying to have a business with anything or promote anything at the moment.
Yeah, but you have an influence on friends?
Well, yeah, definitely have an influence on friends, and working with people who've had some bad viral infections recently, and I've got things that I believe can help, so they will come and talk to me. I find other therapists find me, and I find that people will find me when they need me to ask questions, or if I've got something might be able to help them. Somehow it comes together. That's all I'm going to say about that.
That's all right, but there
are several people I'm helping at the moment who've got quite serious situations, and I don't really want to say any more on that. But I am very interested in continuing with learning more and more about vibrational medicine, and I really see frequency as something that's coming in more and more. And I'm big into sound healing and going to that for my own benefit.
Yeah, no, it's definitely on the rise, isn't it? It's yeah, I'm not going to say any more about that and complicate things. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Christina. But you're having an influence on people. That's what we're talking about. Just being you.
I'm in a big network of other therapists and people working in the alternative health world.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of learning goes on, a lot of sharing.
Yeah, so it's rubbing off on the people around us. That's what we want, isn't it? To start off with, let alone getting out our information out there on social media and other platforms. But that's great. Thanks, Christina. And Katie.
Hi. Well, yeah, I used to be a bit more proactive on social media, and I've gradually this got more and more contentious. I'm thinking, can I even say that anymore? You know, there's so much, you know, even it's tricky. You pull something off a government website and you can't even put that up. I go, what? Anyway, Yeah, for me, I'm actually trying to pull together, because I've got so many decades of pulling all these things together, and I'm not completely wedded to one system. So like you, Sandy, there are all sorts of areas which can be very helpful to people. So I'm trying to pull things together to see what could I do that would produce something that would be sort of self-contained, a great sort of almost like first aid introduction, if you like, and how I could help more people than just the people that I come into contact with. But certainly I have found that using things like homeopathy and essential oils have been really major. My children were brought up with homeopathy, and if they weren't feeling very well, they'd always say, "Mum, have you got a remedy?" So I'd always sit there with my books around me, sort of stroking their heads and trying to work out what the next thing was. And herbal tinctures. So they were brought up, they were very used to that. As I said, it's also important to know when to go and get medical support with something. But so I would sort of always give myself a sort of deadline. I think, well, okay, they've been really, things are not right for them. I'm going to give it another hour. And if not, then I'll call and speak to somebody. But what I found was that usually the things worked within that time. The homeopathy worked within that time. I know this is a contentious one as well, colloidal silver. I've been making it myself, so I'm not reliant on supplies. I've been making it myself for 20 years. It again, even if I thought there was an infection there, it responded. And I've helped people who had ongoing things when somebody for 6 months kept getting their records, kept being lost in the medical system with dental and medical. And they were in absolute agony with this terrible infection in the mouth. And I just kept her going with, she was probably having about half a litre of the stuff every week. And she said, I can just feel it. It just alleviates the swelling. It just starts going down. And so, to be honest, as you were saying, there's often a long period that we might have to wait for aid. So we really do need to educate ourselves into what we can use. And so I have things that I certainly would use for things like, anti-inflammatory and infection reducing in particular, because they're the things that can come up quite suddenly. And a lot of these can be foods as well, using food as medicine. I absolutely love that. I was talking to somebody just recently who, she was born and brought up in this country. Her family was originally from Pakistan, and she said both the grandfathers on either side used herbal and food as remedies, and she'd managed very successfully to help family members who had asthma. She said that they just have ginger and turmeric, strong ginger and turmeric teas, and they get that down, and that sort of alleviates some of the symptoms. So if you have something that's not severe, an ongoing attack, you can find things that will alleviate and improve the symptoms and maybe get you through a difficult time. So I think it is about finding what works for us. As you say, I always say to people, I like the experimenting and have fun experimenting as well. I think that's to not look at it as something that is, a chore. It just lights me up. I find it so exciting to know that some of the best anti-inflammatories around are just in your food if you choose the right ones. Or the best antibiotics, food again. So really, by educating before things get too bad, it will save us a lot of pain in the long run. And certainly my sons, I love it because they're constantly experimenting with stuff. They've both had issues of, whether physical or mental, and they just notice how things change them. And then they'll go, oh, I think I'm not going to have that now. I'm going to try that. And I love that they're just experimenting, having fun with it, getting results. And, that's all I could wish for, really, that people just learn that there are ways they can manage things for themselves, and leave the medical profession for when you really, really need it.
Well, you can imagine if we did that, then we wouldn't be in the state that it's all in, would we? But, you know,
Exactly.
it's hindsight, I guess you can say. But yes, it's getting the word out there that people have to have a backup at home. They have to know how to treat this, and this, without having to go to the doctor for small things. And you know, you can grow herbs in your garden. You know, you can have a little bit of a first aid kit there at home. I've got courses where I show people how to make tinctures and silver water and all those sorts of things. You know, you can make them yourself. So there's lots of things that we can do. I've just been given a question which is for Dee, and this is from Joanna, and she's asking you. She said she looked into, is it Nikon water that you're talking about?
It's Kangen water.
Kangen water, okay, because she said she looked into Nikon water, so I don't know how different that is. I know both of them, but I don't know the ins and outs. You probably do. She thought it was excessively alkaline. She thinks it was 7.365. Oh no, she understands that 7.365 is the ideal pH. Obviously, Nikon wasn't giving that. So, do you have any comment to make about that?
Okay, so 7.0 water is pure filtered water. How I get it from the machine that I have in my kitchen, but hydrogen-rich water is strong. It is alkaline, and my drinking water is 9.5. And what happens is the 9.5 water, because the hydrogen it's popped a molecule from the oxygen, it basically makes the water molecules, instead of clumping together like normal water is, it basically makes them so tiny that they hydrate you properly. Since I started taking or drinking this water, 9.5, all of my gastric issues have gone completely. And I've only been drinking it since March. And so 9.5, and then you could get, so not all water is 7.5 when you actually use the water for different things. So yeah, 9.5 is alkaline. If you've got gastric issues and you've got too much acid, it's perfect. That's what you need. You need to alkalize your stomach so that the acid goes away. However, lots of people have other gastric diagnoses, and they need to be looked at as, do you have too little acid or too much? So that's another thing that you'd have to go on, which pH would you need for that? So that's what I would say.
That's excellent. And she's got another message here saying that it was actually Kangen that she was talking about, not Nikon. So, or whatever it was. So thanks for that, because I used to have one, but I haven't at the moment, having moved. So yes, very important, isn't it, about the water we drink. You know, there's even little coasters that you can sit underneath your water to get the frequency, to change the frequency. There's lots and lots of things out there. And how awesome would it be if we could all get together and put a resources directory together for people? Because by the time they look on the internet, and some of the things work, some don't, and we could filter a lot of things for people, that would be an awesome thing to do, wouldn't it? Anyway, that's just my thoughts going through my head.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. Yes. So yeah.
It would, wouldn't it? So there we go. We've got 10 minutes to go. And so what I think I'll do is I'll throw it open now to, I've got a couple of other stats and things here that you know, I think we've all got the idea that there's a lot of people in the world that are heavily medicated, and they're relying on medications from the pharmaceutical companies, which could come in short supply. I mean, there is talk on the net that, and I think there's some studies being done that they're predicting that half the diabetics by the year 2030 to 2040 won't be able to get any insulin. Okay, so they're actually talking about medicines not being available. So we're sort of at the beginning of this, where we've got to start implementing and really educating people to understand that, you know, they don't need to go to the doctor to get this. They've got to do it themselves, and they can learn, and it's really not hard. It's just perceived to be hard because it's so much easier to just go and get a pill for something, as we know. But I think that time has changed, or is starting to change, and it has to change, like many things in the world. Yeah. So I just want to throw it open just to see if there's any other stories that you've got that are going to help the listeners here to identify with perhaps something else that's gone on, because I've banged on here a little bit about diabetes. But, you know, I'm just going to give a very quick one so that everyone else has a time to say something. I had a young man who's he was about 30, and he went to the doctors and had some blood tests done because he was feeling a bit low. And the next thing he was on cholesterol, blood pressure, and a metformin for blood sugar. Bang, straight away. Didn't even give him time to sort of try and correct things. So that's the sort of things that are happening. And then, you know, trying to unravel that, much easier to work with when they're not on the medication than it is when they're on the medication. So it's really, you know, all doctors are different and everybody is different, and we don't know what we're going to get to work with, but it's just education. So that's what I'm doing with this guy at the moment. So I'll pop over to Dee and see what else she has to contribute.
I would always say to people to really look at who else is out there that could possibly help you, you know, and to look at the alternative to diabetic medication for diabetes in particular is what I would use is coenzyme Q10, because these drugs that you're given, for one thing, they have another impact on another part of your body. So you can't put something artificial into your body and not expect it to have an impact on some other part of your body, because we are not mechanisms. You know, the human body is an organism, and therefore every part works in synergy with each other. So I'd be looking at the pharmaceutical drug for diabetes depletes coenzyme Q10, which you need, and it's depleting as we age anyway. So get some of that. I would say to look into that, look into how that can probably help you, and have a conversation with other people who you know who are really well, maybe a little bit older than yourself, and think, how do you stay so well and so fit and so healthy? And I think you'd probably be surprised that they are not using pharmaceutical drugs as much as you would have thought.
Yeah.
My mother was 91 when she died. She was on 2 paracetamol a day for a dodgy knee. That was it.
Excellent.
Nothing else.
Excellent. Okay, we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to pass it over to Christina.
I don't have anything to say on diabetes. I do.
It doesn't have to be diabetes.
My interest, one of my big interests is seaweed at the moment, and about how we can use seaweed. And so particularly for viruses and colds and flus in the winter. And I know that you're in that part of the year now down in Australia. And I have a lot of people who struggle when we get into cold and flu and viral stuff. And I'm always promoting seaweed because it's a traditional Irish remedy, which I've grown up with. And I find it really effective. So that's one of my big tips. I mean, it's been taken over by commercial world at the moment, and the cost of it has rocketed. And also it's really important to get it grown in a clean environment. So I help a lot of people with seaweed in the winter times.
Fabulous to hear. Okay, Katie.
Well, I think maybe getting back to the water, actually, a little story I have of the last few months was my father had a fall. He's 94 now. He was living independently with help from carers, but after the fall, he was really unstable. He spent a week in hospital. They said he was fit to come home. I arrived from my long journey to the north, and he was sitting down and all seemed fine. Only after my sister had left and he got up, he was very, very unstable. And he couldn't really support himself. It's like his muscles were just giving out. He could feel it. Things were really not right. And I was having to walk about 2 inches behind him just to be sure, so I could help if he was wobbly. And I was up there for a week, and basically I just put so much water in him, just kept reminding him we were just having water, water, water. By day 4, he had very little tremor, because the tremors were so bad, I have to say, that first day, that he couldn't cut up his food. It was so bad. He couldn't raise a glass of water. The water was going everywhere. So it was really, really bad. And within 4 days, most of them had calmed down. Within 5 days, there was not a tremor in his body, including a 20-year-old slight tremor that he'd had in his hands, which I thought maybe was Parkinson's. And he couldn't believe it himself. And I said, so you see the power of just keeping hydrated. That's incredible. How many extra layers of medication could we have put on top of any others? Just go, oh, it's for that, and all we need is to be highly, highly hydrated, because frankly, none of the functions in our bodies work if we're not well hydrated. And very often that is diagnosed as something else, but adding a chemical in is not going to resolve that dehydration issue. And very often people say, oh, but I just go to the toilet, it's so inconvenient. And I said, well, you can have a load of tremors or go to the toilet more frequently. What's your choice, really?
I know, it's a bit crazy, isn't it? Yeah. I've just got a couple of other things here that have been put into the chat, and Joanna says thank you for talking about the water, and saying that almost everyone benefits from a more alkaline diet, which is, I think, what most of us know, and is really good for cancer and diabetes. Exactly. Maybe we need to do more of these on particular subjects, but today is just an intro. And Sally has also brought up a very specific point, that when you've had an operation, like her granddaughter has no thyroid. So yes, you're going to need something then to support that. And, you know, what we're really about today, I think, is getting people to understand themselves, be able to have the remedies and everything at hand, and live lives a lot differently, so that we don't overload the system. Okay, because things happen. We have accidents, you know, something will happen and you know, suddenly you've got a limb missing or a part of your body missing, and that can be just what happens in life. But we need, if there are medicines that will help those people, there could be alternatives. But if you've got something missing, they might need to be taking something like thyroxine, or, you know, there's umpteen different scenarios that we can talk about there. But we're really here talking about prevention and really trying to educate people to understand what they're doing these days is not helping them. They're not helping themselves. So that's where I sit on the subject. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to say? Because we're just on the knocker of 8 o'clock. So anybody else like to say anything? All said and done. So I want to thank the panel, Dee, Christina and Katie, for joining me today. And I hope people have got something out of this. It's really a call to action for people to start being more proactive, even if, you know, you just do a few things yourself. But if you've got people around you, and everybody has, whether they're friends, family, you know, you can't necessarily go telling everybody what to do. But if you start to do things, people see that you become better, or you might start up a conversation saying, I was taking some medication and now I'm not. It's all that ripple effect that's going to, you know, help everybody in the world. So I think that's what all of us are here are after. So thank you once again, and we'll see you again soon. So bye for now.
Bye.